not too bad. We'll look at it, but it wasn't too bad. Yeah.
It's really strange not to bend over, especially when you're alone.
I understand. I had to lay still for about 2 weeks. Had one eye ruptured. Last week we watched The Chosen, episode 1 of season 1, and the main, several characters in there, but the main 4 characters that we touched on was Mary Magdalene, which at the first time we saw her as an adult was Lilith, is what her name, she had taken on the name Lilith. Nicodemus, which was a Pharisee. Matthew, which was a tax collector, and then Simon, which we know as Peter. And it started out with the verses in Isaiah 43:1, and said, "But now thus says the Lord who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine." And in the movie, or in the telecast when they show it, they use the English Standard Version, and I've kind of compared them, and it's not too bad. I mean, I'm not saying bad. It's really close to what the King James Version is. It may have a little phrasing a little bit different, but so I really didn't. I think I have a version of that. I know I have it on my phone, but I think I may have a version of that hard copy too. I might have to look at it a little bit more. But the scene started out with the little girl coming out, which was Mary, coming out to her father, and she was fearful. And she couldn't understand why she was fearful. She couldn't tell her dad why. And fear is something we all face because we just don't know what's going to happen. And the future is, for a lot of us, shouldn't be fearful, and with Christ it isn't. But if you don't have Christ, a lot of people are fearful. Today they're fearful. I mean, right now a lot of kids, wouldn't want to go to school because they're fearful of what could happen. It's just crazy, like we were saying earlier, of what it is, what's happened. But in the prophet Isaiah also experienced fear. I think this is one of the reasons why they threw this in. And Isaiah 6:1 and 1-5 says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke." Verse 5, "So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Why do we fear? Why do you think yourself, me, whoever, why do we fear? Why do human beings have a fear? Now there's 2 things. There's being startled, and I get startled a lot at home because I'm not paying attention and somebody walks up behind me and shakes something or opens a drawer and I jump. I'm not really fearful. I'm just, it shocked me. Yeah. But this is something that is a dread, a fear that comes upon us. And part of that is because of the fallen nature that we have, that we don't know. Before, in the Garden of Eden, before the fall, Adam and Eve walked in the garden, they talked in the garden, they tilled, as far as worked in the garden, whatever that particular may be, but they kept it. And the animals were there, they came by, Adam named the animals. We hear that. They were calm. They were, I don't say domesticated, but they were docile. They wasn't attacking one another, and they wasn't attacking Adam and Eve. So we don't have that fear. Um, they didn't then. Soon as they partook of the apple, or I'm sorry, the forbidden fruit, whatever you want to call it, apple, pear, strawberry, I don't know what it was, but whatever grows on a tree, it changed. God told them it would change, that they would die, and it changed the whole balance of everything. Immediately, when God was walking in the cool of the garden afterwards and went to find them, they hid themselves. And they hid themselves because they were fearful that they were naked. I mean, they knew they were naked and they were ashamed. And that was a first clue to them and to God that they were, you know, fearful. They hadn't experienced this before. So, at least from what we can tell, they didn't have a reason to. Now they have a reason to. Today the animals, some of the animals are very scary. They're very, we have them in cages at zoos to see them. The big gorillas and all these animals, elephants and things. They could, when they get upset or they get challenged, they think you're challenging for their children. You know, they're gonna try to protect them. Birds, they'll swap down on your head and everything. Yeah, they will. They will.
Well, don't you think there can be a healthy fear somewhat?
There is.
And we need to have a reverential fear
Yes.
for, the Lord and
Yes.
His power and what He can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, in our society today, don't you think that a lot of society has lost their fear of repercussions or accountability?
Yes.
They'll just go out and commit all kinds of crimes.
Yes.
All kinds of stuff, and not even be afraid that they're going to have to pay the price.
That's why, and I don't know the cause of it, but it seems like because of that, there is more violence against one another. They're violent. I mean, the other day when they had that shooting, I don't even remember where it was at, but they went out there and they said there's like 100 shell casings at the site, and it's like that's more than one gun, and that's a lot of people shooting back and forth at one another, evidently, or at one person, something.
Isn't that because they don't know God?
Well, they don't know God, but they don't care
No
about other person. Yeah, they don't care about the other person. They see them as whatever, a non-person or an enemy, and they want to get rid of them. Where every person you should value a person. We are missing that today because of what you were saying earlier, that we don't individually, as we talk to somebody today, you can see it as you go through go to the protests. They're yelling at one another. They won't listen. There's no debate anymore. Somebody yells at you, and then they yell back at them just because they're trying to get their point across, and the other person's not going to listen because they just shut them out. They don't want to listen. So what used to be common as far as talking back and forth to people, it doesn't happen today. I was reading today about a class at a school that the teacher said, okay, everybody put everything down, and said, we're going to talk for like 5 minutes, and I want you to talk to individuals. And said about half the class flipped open their laptop. And she goes, no laptops, put them down. We're going to talk to one another.
Words.
In words, back and forth, have conversation.
Not my fingers.
And they said about half of the kids started talking and started conversing and having a good time. And the other half just laid their heads down and they didn't. And she went around, the teacher went around, I think it's a she, went around to try to engage the students.
They don't know how to do
and they don't, because they don't have that from their parents, they don't have that from their families, they don't have that from anybody.
How to communicate, they don't know how to talk. It's all about themselves. They weren't taught at
And they
home.
don't
They
seem to
weren't, so
have
they
a
were.
fear for hell.
No, they
You
don't.
know, the sins and the hell that they're going to go to if they don't repent.
It's not been taught to them about repentance, and people make light of it now. Well, if this is, I don't want to go to heaven if that's all you do is sit on clouds and strum a harp, and if they're partying in hell, that's where I want to be. That's kind of their attitude.
I can remember back when I was growing up earlier, in the churches, part of the time them preachers would preach
Oh yeah,
hell so hot that
Yeah.
you'd be
You-
scared to do anything
Yeah.
out of,
yeah,
afraid you're just going to hell.
that's right. And there's not that many that do that today.
I know.
They don't preach it.
And I
So.
go to church and say nice. But it also this reminds me also, one time I was asked to go speak to a seventh grade class in Bixby because I'm a writer. Those kids, you're right. Not only they don't even know how to communicate with you, they don't know how to write. I said, that's a question I asked. I said, they can't even read. I said, how do anyone can tell me how to write? Well, you just sit down and start. I said, no. You have to learn to talk first, and you have to learn how to read first. And they looked at me like they were dumbfounded. Oh, they don't want to do it. Seventh graders. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, I think we recognize how much evil there is in the world.
Yeah.
And our fear may not necessarily be for ourselves as it is for loved ones
For
or
others.
friends. I'm sure the people down in the valley right now is thinking about, that could have been me.
Yeah.
That could have been my
Yeah.
kids.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that didn't get it. I mean, the fear that it could happen the next time to them.
My granddaughter just finished 4th grade, and it's just
Don, my brother's just graduated also from elementary.
Mhm.
This morning when he came to my house, he goes, "What have they been here?"
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And there's, we can't answer the question. I mean, we can try, but we don't know what was going on in that. And he's 18, but he's still a child. Something's wrong with him.
Did the news say that the grandmother is
Haven't
in
heard.
the hospital?
Haven't heard on her status. Just heard that she got shot.
I did hear just about an hour ago that she is in critical condition, but she's still alive.
Still alive.
Okay. I
And
hadn't
he shot
heard.
her in the forehead.
Yeah. Well, Isaiah,
But she called the police. She didn't want to call the police.
he wasn't actually called by God, as far as, I mean, he was called by God, but he wasn't called because he was worthy. He states that himself. I'm a man of unclean lips and a people of unclean lips. Isaiah 6 and 7 shows us his sin was purged. If you go back and read that, where he touches the coal to his tongue, the angel takes the coal out and touches, and he cleanses him, and he makes him available for to be able to work. God's chosen people would not listen to him. We just got finished with Exodus, and we saw several times where they said, and they would agree, yes, we're going to do this, and then it wasn't just a few days later that they were misusing, what God had told them, just ignoring what God had told them. So, what does all this suggest about God's character? Not our character, but God's character.
Integrity and honor.
He's patient. He is loving. He created us to be able to worship him. And yet we turned our back on him. And we still do it today, each and every day.
Yeah, right. He knows that. He knows it before.
Sure, he knew it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And he made a way for us. That's what this whole series is about. But the way he chose us, he calls us. And he calls us by our name. First character that we talked about was Mary. And in the Bible, in Luke 8, 1 and 2, it tells us, now it came to pass afterward Then he went through every city and village, preaching and bringing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God, talking about Jesus. And the 12 were with him. So it's after, time-wise, this is kind of after he chose the 12. Now in the movie, it's a little bit ahead of that, because he hadn't gone through and done that yet, but in the series. And certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Okay? Mary called Magdalene, out of whom he had come 7 demons. And that's where it goes back when it was showing about Mary and her being abused by the demons herself and by the people. Okay, the Roman soldiers that showed going in and all that. Mary was called out of the most obvious kind of darkness. Being possessed by 7 demons is like a horror movie, which we'd see today. That means that Mary didn't earn the Savior's help with good behavior. In her, there was nothing good. The call in her life was by a divine initiative and executed by Jesus in spite of who she was and for the sake of who he created her to be. So he had a plan for Mary, and even though in the movie, and they take a lot of liberty, we don't know exactly what happened, but with 7 demons in her, she was going to be not a person that you'd want to mess with, probably be around or anything. And most likely she may have been in the, quote, red district, like they said, where she was. The next one is Nicodemus, okay? John 3 and verse 1, we find, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And the ruler of the Jews he was one of the Sanhedrin. So he was coming up in the story from Jerusalem, where his home was, but he was coming up to Capernaum, and that's where they were at the time. That's where Mary Magdalene was at, and that's where he was at. And he was going to do some teaching. Evidently, he did this routine yearly to teach some of the older students that we saw. I don't know if you noticed, there was 2 different costumes that they had: a white robes for some of the students, and then like Nicodemus, he had a black robe one, and a couple of the older ones had black robes. That indicates their status. Okay, so they were older, more mature, more into it. This is off the subject, but when my mom was in the hospital, I learned that the length of the coat that a doctor wears indicates different degrees and how much they have. So if it's to the floor, they're way up there in doctorology. That's what they told me. I can't prove it. I didn't go back and look at it, but
The longer the coat, the more degrees.
the more experience, I'll say it that way. They usually have more degrees. They may have a specialized degree. Somebody may correct me on here when they see it, but that's what it is. And I know one of the one lady that was treating Mom, that was the kind of oversee nurse, hers was real short because she was training. She was kind of her first year. Yeah.
That's how they tell when you walk in the room.
Supposedly. That's what it is, because she'd come in every morning and kind of give us a report of all the other doctors, and then later on the other doctors would come in and do their individual analysis of it.
So. But I thought that was just what they wore,
Yeah, well it is, but it's kind of a status symbol.
Yeah, I just thought they were, one day they wanted to wear that short one.
No. Well, that's what I've been told, so you'll have to ask your doctor friend if you can find
I'll
out.
ask my retired nurse.
But this is well, some of them don't anymore, but it's kind of a tradition. I mean, most time when I see my doctor, he's wearing a white overcoat, or sometimes, but sometimes he's not. I've been in there with him, and he's just wearing a suit, not a suit, but a tie and a shirt.
Yeah.
Now, was Nicodemus that one they called Rabbi?
He was. He was the first one that in the movie, when they was coming through with the stage, if you want to call that, the old wagon, and him and his wife was there. Yeah. So that was,
Was he prophesying Jesus?
he was not prophesying. No, he was actually in the stage or the covered wagon. He was in praying, and his wife was just there. They were getting transported from Jerusalem to Capernaum, and it was odd because instead of horses, they had like what 4 or 6 slaves out there pulling on it. So, and then the Roman soldiers come up. So Nicodemus was set apart. He was a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrians. Now he would have been on the other side of Mary. Mary's on this side of society. Nicodemus is on the other side, the elite.
Like the other side of the river.
Well, he's on the elite side. Yeah, he's on the south side of the railroad track, and somebody's on the north side of the railroad track. You'll say it that way. Nicodemus was set apart for the Lord's service from a very young age. He therefore considered by those around him to be worthy of the deference, respect, and privilege that came with his position. Sometimes we take advantage of that, and we see that. In the series, Nicodemus, as it goes forward, he starts questioning. He's already questioning in this one some of his learnings. He's looks aged, 50 or more years old. I don't know in the movie. I don't know how old he was. We don't know. But he was a, quote, senior, one of the older Sanhedrians. But he starts questioning some of the things that they are believing and what's happening. And we'll see that as it continues on through there. I think when it started out, he likely believed he was worthy of God's calling already, which means his position and pride had made him slow to see his own desperate need for reconciliation with God. I think he's starting to discover that. Oh, he knows everything about the law, the Torah. He studied it. He knows all about that. But when he encounters Mary, Lilith, that shakes him to his core because he can't. He tries to exorcise the demons, and he can't. And that just that shakes him, and that gets him started, I think, down this path. He's already a little bit on that path, but as we go forward, we'll see more. Matthew 9:9, and it's interesting. Matthew, the tax collector, Brother Epperson, he asked, "Was that Zacchaeus?" And I said, "No. If you listen closely, it said Matthew in there a couple times." In 9:9, it says, "As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, 'Follow me.' So he arose and followed him." In the story, and in evidently, what they say in the historical realms, he was part of the Jewish people, but he was a tax collector. How do you view tax collectors today? Lawyers, anybody like that? You kind of a little bit of disdain, isn't it? A little bit of, I don't like you. It's even worse back then because what they made their living on, if Rome had a tax of 5%, they would tack on however much they felt like they could to make their living. So it may be another penny or another 1% or 2%, whatever they made, that was theirs to do. So, and they were doing it for Rome, okay, which was an occupying force that throughout this whole season with Jesus in his time frame, the Romans were occupying Jerusalem and all of Judea. So that's why it showed as he went through, he was going through to pick out what to wear that morning. He had a whole bunch of clothes. They looked all the same or different. And then, a little different. And then he had a whole pile of sandals. I don't know if you noticed that. A whole bunch of sandals there. And he picked out a set, put them on, and then he had another set and he put in his pocket.
Well,
He
probably felt rich having all those answers.
He was rich. And it goes back, he had slaves because he told them, I'm going to lock you in. and he goes out and he locks the door. And I don't know if you've noticed, but he did it like 3 times. He sat there. He's a little OCD, and you'll see that as you go through the rest of the movie. He has to be, because this is part of who he is as far as being tax collector. He's very good with money, and he's very good at figuring. I don't know if you saw him when he was going through, and he was telling Peter or Andrew how many months, and he would count on his fingers, and at a tax rate of whatever it was, 10% a week, I think it was, at one time. Yeah. It was the penalty was 10% a week because he hadn't paid since the last month. So it's 4 more weeks, and he's counting up, and I mean, he was doing it very quickly. So he's very meticulous. We see that. I mean, from the movie, we get a little bit of that from the Bible too, because Matthew is writing the whole book of Matthew, and it's the same Matthew, the tax collector. He writes specifically to the Jewish people. He writes some things that aren't in the other 4 Gospels, but he's very specific, and he's very pointing out his Jewish history, his Jewish heritage. Okay? It says Matthew was too busy living for himself to care whether or not he was worthy. He was pursuing his own thing, which was mainly money. For a time, he seemed oblivious, or at least indifferent, to God's call on his life. And you'll see that too. It's about, I don't know, 5 or 6. It'll get there, but it's going to be a little bit longer for Matthew to be join up with the disciples. But it's very interesting as we go through how he starts seeing things and can't really understand what's going on that convinces him. Then the last one was Simon, or Peter as we know him. Matthew 4:18 says, and Jesus walking by the Sea of Galilee saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And we saw that. They were out trying to, when we first see them, they're trying to, Peter's getting beat up, but they're setting up a fight. Peter's getting beat up by his brother-in-law, but he's just hanging back until they're wagering going on, and he's trying to earn a little money because they can't. Their fishing is not going well. We see that in the series. It says Simon wore his messy heart on his sleeve. He's sometimes prideful, sometimes insecure, heart rolled up, gotta earn my own worth, sleeve. His self-sufficiency would have been useful on a fishing boat, but it often delayed his understanding and the corresponding action when it came to following Jesus. He wanted to do it himself. We see that several times.
Yeah.
He just told his brother Simon, I don't want you to get messed up with this. I'm going out, because he was fishing on Shabbat, which was their holy day, and they weren't supposed to be doing any work at all. But the law does allow, if there's something life-threatening, you can go ahead and do some work. Well, Simon was twisting it around, said this is life-threatening. Wasn't really, but it was to him. And he told told Andrew, his brother, no, you can't go fishing with me tonight. I don't want you to get you involved with this. So he's got this, I want to do it myself type. And I don't know if Andrew is older or Simon's older. I really don't know. It doesn't tell us. But the way he's acting, I kind of think Peter's older a little bit, but I don't know. That's just my guess.
But didn't they usually always go out in at least 2?
Usually they did, and that's a little.
That's a stretch.
That's a little stretch, but it could be. I could see that, because the boat's not that big. I don't know if you saw that boat. It's you get four people in it max, but one person could still handle it. Had rows there and everything, oars there that they could get it in and out. You would think for safety wise they would do 2.
Well, and then those nets, if they catch much, they
Yeah.
get heavy.
Now you haven't seen the nets yet. He hadn't shown them, but their nets are not real large. That they show first when he's fishing by himself. It's just what we'd call a seine net almost. You just throw it out and it gets maybe 5 or 6 foot wide, and it drops down, got weights on it, and then they pull it back in. But you'll see that in an upcoming one. But when they're fishing with others, yeah, they've got a big net that they let out and they drag between, and even they'll drag it even between two boats to get them going out. Because we haven't seen them yet, but James and John's coming along here. They're fishermen also, and we'll see them maybe in the next one. I'm not sure, or the next one. But one of the things that they talked about when Simon said he's got something to take care of the taxes, he's going to start informing to the Romans who is actually fishing on Shabbat and catching fish, so the Romans can go and gather their taxes from them, and that'll release him from his taxes. That's his payment. I don't know if you caught that there then. He's going to be a spy, and Andrew wasn't going to have it. And as a matter of fact, he said it's work, but Simon and James and John, they get pretty ticked off when they find out about it here coming up. We'll see that a little bit later. But I can see that, and all that's fabricated. We don't know that, but I can see that happening. Simon's wanting to do it, and he sees an out that in his mind, it's okay. I'm making money. It's okay if I'm informing on somebody that's doing better than me, because I'm not doing very good.
As we watch it and we see the different personality types,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about y'all, but I sit there thinking about the people that I know today.
Oh, yeah.
It fits into those different
Exactly.
personality
That shows
traits.
something too. It shows that they're human also, and they have anger too.
Yeah. They were people. They were
Yeah,
people,
regular people,
just like us.
because you don't always think of people being regular people like we are.
Mm-hmm. They were, and even 2,000 years ago, so it's a lot different than what we know, and it's in a different culture. So a lot of things that they're doing, we don't understand. I think this helps me put it in place a little better. Now, it may not be correct, but it's probably historically accurate as to what somebody in that situation would do. That's what I'm saying.
It teaches us a lot. It does. It teaches us that they have to earn a living just like
Oh,
we
sure.
have to earn
Oh,
a living.
sure.
They have feelings and anger and all like we do, because we're human.
Right.
And we have different personalities as they do. So it really does teach us at the same time.
You gonna say something,
I
John?
was gonna say, in Israel, when we went, it seemed like they had a replica of a boat where they pulled one up out of the sea, for the sea, and they were a little larger than what I pictured. Peter just being able to do everything himself.
Well, it could have been. There are lots of different boats, I'm sure, back then, and you saw that a little bit on there, and you'll see it a little bit more. I think them being the family fishermen, him and Simon, and I think John and James and John, their boats are about the same, but we'll see. We don't know if they just entered into this fishing business or their dad was part of it. We don't know any about that. Now we do know James and John's dad was part of it. It talks about it in the Bible that he was a fisherman, and then that's why he brought us Zebedee, right? So we know that, but they may have just taken on this because they lived there by Capernaum, and that's what everybody did around there. If you wasn't, somebody that cooked, made bread, or made shepherd, you're probably a fisherman, because that's where you could go out and get your food and sell it to people. So, well, these four people, Mary, she serves as the ideal respondent to God's call through Jesus in this scene, okay? Because she is totally hopeless and she can't get out of it herself. Nicodemus, he would have been horrified by the notion a demonized woman from the red quarter is the model that we're supposed to follow, because she did go follow the Lord. Okay, as soon as Jesus contacted her and talked to her, she turned her life around, and we'll see that in the next one. Matthew, he was just been bewildered. What's all this fuss about? And can it be taxed? We'll see that in a little bit later. And Simon, he feels cheated. How could she receive God's calling when I'm clearly trying harder? Peter, he has a complex. And we'll see that a little bit later on, too, a little more. It'll come out. And we see that all through there because Jesus had to rebuke him, you know, when he told him, "Oh, we'll follow you wherever." And he said, "Get out of me, Satan." Get out of here, Satan. Because, and he had to tell him, a little later on, you're going to be denying me. No way I'm going to deny you. Oh, yeah, you are. He's full of himself.
Yeah, kind of a braggart.
He is. He is.
Yeah,
He
like
is.
himself too much.
Calling happens before God begins his transformative work of redemption because he sees our before to the after that he purposed and planned from the beginning. Just as he did with the nation of Israel, we are valuable to God because he made us and loves us. And Harold already jumped the gun on there. Do you identify with one of the four listed? Some of the people that you can put yourself into or know? No, that's exactly right. Which one you start thinking in your head, which one am I? Or which one is so and so? I know somebody just like them, We do that.
We take the fifth around here.
Well, I have where we've been to church in the past, there's a particular man, and I'm thinking, okay, he's like a Peter, because it seemed like he was always, even in a testimony, he was always bringing things back to him,
Right.
or what have you, what he done, or what.
Some people that's in their makeup. It's just until we see God really working on somebody to bring it back that it's not all about you.
Right. God needs to bring humbleness sometimes.
That's right. That's right. It's very hard because essentially it's down to us. Although we're married, we love our wives or our families or whatever, it's still I'm the one in control of me and how I view myself and how I can project to people. One of the things that somebody like that puts me off. I have a hard time dealing with that.
I don't like dealing with arrogance.
Some of the ministries that I see today, I have a pet peeve. I don't like it when they call it so and so ministry and it's after their name. That's just I know they want to differentiate themselves, but to me it seems a bit of pride in there. That, and maybe that's just me, and we can get in that mold and we can do. I've seen the best of people do that. That when they're testifying, just as exact, God did this for me, and God told that. Well, we got to be real careful about what God did for us. He does a lot of things for us, but sometimes things happen to us because we obeyed God, and we had nothing to do with it. We did what He had a purpose for us, like it said, and if we followed after Him, it worked out. We think that because of that, I know one time I said that, God did bless me with this certain, and I look back on it now and I said, that was so stupid. Why did I say that? And I do grant that it was a blessing at the time, but I think it just worked out that way that it happened. I'm not saying God didn't cause it to happen. He could have or he couldn't have, but I was prideful in that, I think, when I was testifying of that way. So we have to do that.
I caught what you said, and I think to myself, well, God gives miracles because He gave me a miracle by His choice.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm asked to testify, then I have to say that God actually gave me a miracle and what He gave me.
Sure.
So that makes it look like it's also drawing myself to my name.
Well, but that's one of the things that God calls us to testify. Yeah. And we have to testify, but you can do it in a way that isn't bragging. You can do it a way.
I didn't do it by myself.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's There's a lot of times
In
that
fact,
we had
I
nothing
always
to
say
do.
he chose to give it to me because he didn't have to choose.
Right, right. And the last couple of verses just kind of sum this up. None of us is worthy of God's loving attention. To be called by Him and to accept His invitation through Jesus, to be chosen and rescued in spite of our absolute unworthiness, requires us to trust Him, which includes letting Him make whatever changes to our lives He deems best. And when we do, fear no longer has a place. Now, like you said, there is a reverential fear. I think part of that of Isaiah, when he saw I think that was part reverential because it's new. John had that very same feeling when he saw heaven open up and, woe is me, and fell down, and the angel said, don't worship me, There's something that happens when we get in the presence of God. Just like Moses, when the veil was upon Moses, he had to come down, the people couldn't look upon him. There was nothing Moses did. Moses was called. He was a shepherd out there tending sheep, but God was getting him ready for 40 years to lead people out. When he got there, God blessed him, but at the end of his life, he disobeyed God and didn't get all that he could have. I'm not saying that he could have entered the promised land, what God promised all of his people, but he didn't. I think when we get to heaven, there's a lot of things that we could have had more if we just listened to it more when we get there. Because we're stubborn people. We want to do it our way. And if we would just let up and let God have the way, I think it would be a lot easier. But we just...
That's why we're supposed to justify too. When God blesses us for whatever reason He wants to bless us, whether it be a miracle, whatever it be, I do on the streets, and I believe it's because He wants us not only to give Him the glory from us, but to testify for others to see.
Sure. They want to know what's happening.
Because that might win a soul to Christ.
That's right. The last part, fear not, God can redeem your choices and use them for good. So whatever choice you make, He can still work it out. Fear not, God can heal your heart, your body, and your relationships. Fear not, you were made for more than what you have experienced so far, even though you may be X years old. Okay, He still has a calling for us. And fear not, the King of the universe has called you by name. To me, that's awesome. The song, I'm a Friend of God, that just, I don't know if you know it, but that song just gets me. To have God be able to call me a friend, He calls me.
What's the name?
That's just awesome. I'm a Friend of God.
I'm a friend of God.
I'll have to play it for you, but it's I Am a Friend of God.
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, you can just Google it out there and you can find it.
The Bible says we are fearfully
and wonderfully made. That's right.
And it's kind of like if we're here,
It's because of Him. That's right. We're here for a purpose.
That not only are we here because God wants us here to fellowship and share with each other, but I honestly truly believe that we're not here to testify about anything except Him.
Well, it's His purpose to try to win other people for Him. That's right.
He uses us that way too.
That's right.
If we do it the right way.
Well, even if we don't, sometimes He can correct that.
He's created us to love Him.
Yes, that's what He did.
Worship Him.
That's it.
I'm so grateful